Chapter 1. Science. You're doing it wrong, creationists. The real chapter title is What is Science, but this just seems more apt, you know? Roger Patterson begins with, in its original form, science simply meant knowledge. Science, in the view of an outspoken part of the scientific community, is the systematic method of gaining knowledge about the universe by allowing only naturalistic or materialistic explanations and causes. Oh dear. Well, he's actually pretty correct so far, aside from the outspoken part. Stop pretending there's a serious debate, Mr. Patterson. Roger Patterson fails. The denial of supernatural events limits the depth of understanding that science can have. Well, no. Simply saying God did it closes scientific inquiry. Roger Patterson actually openly admits this later, and yet claims that the view is false, all because science was founded by Christians such as Kepler, Galileo, Pascal, Mendel, etc., etc. What? This has to be a joke, and yet that's his argument. Setting up a false dichotomy between evolution and religion is utterly wrong. He attempts to have you believe that if these men were alive today, they would believe in creationism solely because they are Christian. And no, the book doesn't actually outright say that, but a bit of deeper reading exposes this rather blatant flaw. Roger Patterson is really Kanthoven in disguise. The words creation and evolution can be used in many different ways. Evolution will be used in this book to describe the naturalistic process that is alleged to have turned molecules into man over billions and billions of years. Well, number one, no, not really. They're pretty rigid in their definition. And two, attacking your own version of evolution is a simple straw man. Why must you abuse this poor thing so? However, I'll play along and pretend as though evolutionary biology has anything to do with abiogenesis or cosmology or any other field that isn't biology. Mr. Patterson then goes on to split up science into two different types of science: observational science and historical science. The former he basically calls real science, being something you can demonstrate in a lab, and the latter he says it's philosophy like creationism and apparently evolution. I'll go along with the distinction for now, noting with a hint of pleasure that he actually just called evolution real science. However, Roger Patterson needs to visit a damn library. Neither creation nor evolution is directly observable, testable, repeatable, or falsifiable. Epic fail. Evolution has been observed, tested, repeated, and is falsifiable. The change in allelic frequency over time is well documented. When it comes to other fields of science, he's attempted to blanket under evolution. They're also observable, testable, and falsifiable, and sometimes even repeatable. Creation is right on, though. It's really not science. At least he got that one right. Then he attempted to redefine theory as well, splitting it into operational theory and historical theory. Operational theory is once again correct, being an explanation of a set of facts based on a broad set of repeatable and testable observations that is generally accepted within a group of scientists. He forgot falsifiable, but we'll forgive him. But, once again, Roger Patterson is either ignorant or a liar. That evolution has been elevated to the status of operational theory, and in fact, in the opinion of some, is not due to the strength of the evidence, but in spite of it. Well, number one, it is a fact. Allelic frequencies do change over time. But a fact is not stronger than a theory, as stated in your own definition. Learn to read, Mr. Patterson. And number two, we'll get to that one later, most likely, but it appears Mr. Patterson is utterly ignorant of the evidence. We'll forgive him again, because we're nice, generous people. Apparently, a historical theory explains origins, and Mr. Patterson uses the evolutionist conspiracy card once again, and seems to believe that the laws of nature change randomly. Without uniformitarianism, science is unreliable and cannot be conducted. I just want to point out one little tidbit before I move on to his reference articles. Roger Patterson is kind of right. Noah's flood, for example, would have devastated the face of the earth and created a landscape of billions of dead things buried in layers of rock, which is exactly what we see. And yes, we do. Buried in chronological order with no exceptions. If such a devastating flood had happened, fossils would be scattered across the different eras randomly in places that they wouldn't even belong. And of course that is false. That is not what we see. The reference articles, written by Dwayne Gish, Ken Ham, and some guy named Hodge, all bring up the false dichotomy of evolution and religion yet again. All three articles are fallacious pieces of shit, but Gish's in particular is quite sickening, equating evolution with atheism with nihilism. I'll also answer his questions at the end of the chapter that he posed. 1. Do all scientists believe in naturalistic evolution? Why or why not? No, because some scientists are religious and can reconcile their beliefs with real science. Question 2. Are there really any alternatives to some form of naturalistic evolution in science if science is restricted to naturalism? Aliens existing in a parallel dimension are causing animals to appear to evolve. There's one, no matter how crazy it may sound. Still, it's more of a scientific theory than creationism. 3. Since evolution and creation are both based on religious beliefs, why should one be taught in public schools and not the other? Possibly because one is science and one isn't. And evolution is not religion. It does not have a doctrine with a strict set of rules and ceremonies and is no way a philosophy for life. Question 4. Should there be a distinction between operational science and historical science? Not really. Historical science doesn't really exist. Question 5. Since a naturalistic approach in science can only refer to materialistic explanation, how can naturalists use logic if logic is not a material part of the universe? I'm just going to assume he's joking and move on. 6. Is it necessary for science to allow only naturalism? Yes. Supernatural explanations and scientific inquiry. Drill that into your head. 7. Would all scientific thought and advancement end if supernatural creation was accepted as a possible model for how the universe and life began? Not all of it, no. If the supernatural was responsible for the creation of the universe, nothing would really change in any field of science not related to the origin of the universe. Accepting such a measure for how life began, likewise wouldn't end scientific thought and advancement only in that field. Accepting a supernatural explanation ends discussion in the field it is accepted in. 8. Why is supernatural creation considered to be a science stopper and not a science starter, considering that most of the founding fathers of science believed in the Bible and a supernatural creation event? Because they didn't base their science on the Bible, and instead followed facts to a conclusion as all good scientists do and should, and also because evolution was proposed when they were alive. Supernatural creation is all they knew, with threat of death. Question 9. If an all-knowing creator God exists, wouldn't it be logical to say that he knows about the scientific laws he created? Why not use what he says as the foundation for scientific thinking? Well, yes, for the first question, but as for the second, because of the very first word in the first question. If. We cannot simply assume that the supernatural exists. There has to be proof, and because you can't prove it with science, it is not science.